Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Can I do a quick audio check? If someone can confirm you hear me properly? So let's wait for others. There are quite several colleagues who are supposed to join. All right. Thanks for confirming, everyone. Appreciate it. So I think let's start while others are joining. The first activity, the first thing that we are going to do is I'm going to give a quick introduction to myself, and then I'll ask you a quick question just so that we do a check-in in order to understand what is your expectation in terms of this particular session, right? Uh, so in the meantime, let me share the screen. Let me share the URL. So this is on YouTube as well. For the colleagues who will not be joining us on Zoom, I'll be sharing that link here. So let me do that. So maybe let's do this, right? So let's start with the quick check-in activity. So this will not be unfair for the colleagues who have joined on time. So let me do this. Let me post this particular link asking you to respond to it. Here it is. It's an ideas board. What I want you to do quickly is to just answer my question there. I'm basically asking two questions from you. Please do answer these two questions for me so that I understand your background as to what exactly your expectation in terms of this particular session. So maybe let's spend about 3 minutes there just answering those two questions. Then I'm gonna head into the contents. Okay, so I see some comments coming onto the board. Thank you for those who entered it. I would expect every one of you to just respond to those two questions. So if you just join the session, I'm going to share the same link again. So I have asked everyone to respond to these two questions for me. The intention behind these two questions is to do a quick check-in, so that we all understand what is expected out of this particular session, so that I during the session I will be able to go through at least most of it, right? In case it's not within the agenda that I have planned for the session. Here it is again for those who just joined the session. Do enter your answers to that. Right. So let's start. Let's move on. So I see a comment from someone. Hello, sir. Will you be sharing the recording later on? I might need to disconnect for some time. Don't want to miss out. Yes, yes, Gaurav. I will share the YouTube feed where it will be recorded. Yeah. Thanks for just acknowledging that you will be kind of having a distraction. Okay. So let me share the screen. Let's have a look at the board quickly just to understand what the input that you have got here. So I see 6 points put down into what is, there's a typo though, apologies for that. What is your top challenge regarding Jira workflows, right? So I see few comments. So let me run through that quickly. I'm yet to explore Jira as in my company, we use an in-house tool similar to Jira, right? To have a clear workflows of sprints. From Anuradha, working with Jira in DevOps causes repetition of work. Also in regular projects in Jira poses some rigidity. Okay, interesting point. Thank you for that, Anuradha. My team has been using Jira. It is very useful in project management. However, not everyone is very keen in updating their tasks. So this, trust me, this is a universal problem, right? We who entered it. Thank you for your comment. So this is one of the things that you got to fix, right? Possibly, the discussion will help you to figure out how to effectively handle that concern, because it's also a responsibility of the leadership team, project managers, scrum master, product owner, to ensure that you optimize your Jira setup so that your people are inclined in updating and utilizing Jira, right? Sometimes when it's too hectic, your guys, your teams will not follow through, right? So let's get into that. Users do not update statuses in workflows. Yeah, so that is a problem. That is something that you definitely have to fix. Someone says no thanks, so fine. Yes. Thank you for your genuinity there. Again, Anuradha says, still trying to figure out how we can use all or most of Jira features, working with only 20 to 30 feature usability. Yeah. So this is why one reason I started coaching professionals as well as organizations on Jira adoption, simply because this is one of the most overlooked aspects of agility, right? Why I get so much traction for the programs schedule under our program list is that this is mostly overlooked area for most of us, right? Most of the agile coaches tend to just get away from the subject of Jira, think, saying that, hey, you are agile, don't worry much about Jira. Now, this is a myth, right? So if you are using a tool, finding the most optimal way of using that tool is part of your game, right? If you are given a tool, why not you optimize it, right? Why do you think of various alternatives, various different tools to get the same work done? So one problem I see is that in most of the agile organizations, we have multiple tools being adopted, right? Most of them are redundant. So when you provide a lot of alternatives in a given context, right, I'm sure the people and your teams will be confused. Your stakeholders will be frustrated because you are not optimizing one tool. Rather, you are trying to use many tools to get the work that is possible to be done in Jira through those alternative tools. So I'm going to share some of the tips, particularly on the workflows here. I'm not going to talk about the general context because time is not enough. The next comment that I see is wanted to explore more how we can effectively use and track projects burn charge properly. So trust me, this is one of the key focuses that we have to work on. Uh, in every agile transformation engagement that I work on, this is one of the first things to fix, one of the key things to fix as well. Why? Because if you want to be agile, you need to ensure that you make progressive delivery. You make progress within new iterations, right? So most of us are mini waterfall, meaning that you start a sprint and you have a flat burn down until the last day of the sprint, right? Until the last day, you have no clue what is being done, what is not being done. So you end up transferring majority of your stories into the upcoming sprint. Now that's not agility, isn't it? So you're spot on, whoever who put this comment. So definitely that is something that we need to fix as agilist. The fourth thing is user story creation. That's another thing. Yeah. So that's definitely one of the major aspects that you have to look at. Okay. So I'm pretty clear. So all what you have said here can be achieved through this particular session because nothing complex, I would say. You have thought of things that are totally possible to achieve here, right? So in the meantime, if you have any further questions during the session, feel free to ask, comment, so that we have that interaction, which is ideally the right way of moving, right? All right, so now let me move on to, so I'm going to close these two folks there. I'm going to get started here, right? Uh, let me run through a quick introduction to what we are trying to achieve here so that you have just enough understanding on workflow implementation. It's a pretty straightforward thing, right? Implementing a workflow, tweaking it the way you want is not so difficult. But the major or the key aspects, the most critical aspect that you need to look into is beyond implementing Jira workflows itself, right? The most of the teams get it wrong, get the things wrong at the initial steps, right? That is when they decide to implement a workflow. What generally most of the organizations tend to do is just implement whatever their current process as it is into a workflow. I mean, that is exactly what you need to do if you don't have a plan. But here is the problem, right? If you are a team who haven't defined your optimum workflow, defined the optimum process for you to operate within your team and organization, just converting that into a Jira workflow will not make you a high performing team, right? Why all these things? Why all these tools? Why Jira? Is simply because we want to become a high performing team. There's no question about it, right? Why most of, all these organizations, all of our organizations would invest money, time, and energy on a tool like Jira is simply to become that, right? You want to become a high performing team. But the problem is we approach it wrong. So I'm going to educate you on some of these strategies just before we go into Jira and then start implementing a workflow. So I'm going to do a end-to-end walkthrough, right? I'm not able to go through every aspect of workflow. That is what I'm going to do in my masterclass. That is a 3-hour masterclass, and then you will be given a complimentary session if you join the workflow class on Jira automation. It's another masterclass where you are going to master the automation, out of automation in Jira, right? So in this session, what I'm trying to do is to give you a good enough, sufficient briefing about how you should adopt Jira to implement the ideal workflow that you need. So I'm going to demonstrate creating a very simple workflow, telling you certain tactics that you can straight away go and adopt in your organization. All right, wait for that. So in the meantime, while I'm talking about these things, if you have a question, please do type them in the comment segment. I'll open a Q&A session in the last 15 minutes. So that is an opportunity for you to clarify anything that you want to clarify, right? But on workflows, I'm not able to talk about anything else than workflows. I want to purely focus on workflow implementation, right? Okay, so let me get into the full screen. Where is that full screen? Yeah, full screen mode. So you know about me, but just to brief about my exposure and why I'm here talking to you about Jira Workflow. Currently, I work for a startup slash scale up who is on that is on veterinary online application, one of the online applications for vet clinics. So I'm basically heading the projects at Vetstoria, that is Vetstoria, and I'm heading the projects there. So if you want to get in touch with me, you have multiple ways, right? At the moment, my Facebook is being hacked, so I'm not on Facebook, but you can contact me on any of other 3 things, right? I'm in the recovery process of Facebook. So you can get in touch with me through the email. I'm pretty much available in LinkedIn. So if you want to get in touch with me, message me, send a connection request, I'm more than happy to work with you. Right. Now, this is where I want to start. I want to give an executive statement in terms of overall workflow implementation. If you are someone very keen in implementing the most appropriate workflows for your organization, this is my stance. And I suggest you to adopt the same stance or similar stance before you get into Jira, right? If you don't have clarity on this high level mindset, what you're going to do with Jira is going to be suboptimal. It's not going to give you the ultimate results, right? Oops, so there is a participant. Let me accept your ID. So this is what I need to say. Optimize your processes to be lean. Focus on value creation. Implement them in Jira. Now you see the thought of the sequence of thoughts, sequence of your approach, right? It is never Jira first. It is never any other tool first. If you do that, you have got the grip wrong. You have holding something that is very, very tricky with the wrong grip. So if you don't have the proper grip into the best tool available in the world, you're not going to be helping your team or the rather organization. So this is where I'm saying your grip has to be your overall mindset at first. That is why I'm saying your processes have to be lean. When I say lean, you need to clearly identify the fat around your processes, cut them off. There's no question about it. So if you are an organization who haven't paid sufficient attention on the right mindset, particularly overlooking the lean mindset, you're not going to go a long journey. You're not going to become a high performing organization easily, right? You might employ similar thinking, still you get the same thing done, right? What lean tells you is make your processes just enough for your organization. Never overcomplicate your processes. Ensure that your processes are optimal so that your people best utilize their time, energy, and money to produce the work that is expected to be produced. When it's not lean, what happens is you do a lot of energy waste, spending your time and energy on various malpractices, right? Totally unnecessary activities within your processes. So most of the traditional organizations who are trying to shift from traditional ways of working to the agile ways of working struggle there. Got it? Because if you look at the industrial revolution, few decades ago, our focus was on the processes, right? We said processes is king. If you want to become a great organization, you have to have very detailed, very comprehensive processes adopted by your organization. That's where, if you look at some traditional organizations are still trying to keep the people stuck in those processes, thinking that the only way to get the work done by your people, only way to get the best out of your people is putting them around the structure, right? Calling it a process and insisting that this process cannot be violated, right? That's not going to work in the modern days, right? Adapting Jira, you can never think of such approach. If you do so, you are going to fail. I'll tell you one example. Uh, so just before this particular session, I had a discussion with it was a coaching discussion with one of my colleagues, actually. One thing that I raised there is that if your organization is trying to time track, that's not a practice that is healthy in the modern way of working. The moment you try to restrict people, asking them to put the time that they come in and the time that they go in, you are actually asking them to limit their contribution. Your approach should never be that. Your approach should be empowering them to do what they are supposed to do, right? Just like what we see in the open source development space, right? And no one will be paid. No one is paid. No one is told what to do, but there are enough people, developers and techies coming and helping those open source platforms and technologies, right? How? They have been empowered. They have figured their niche. They know that this is something that is intrinsic to them. It's not something external. Just because someone tells you something that you have to work on something, you're not going to work. So ensure that your focus is, your mindset is a lean mindset. Then you got to focus on the value creation, mostly overlooked aspect. Uh, then you think of Jira. So if you approach this way, I assure you're going to succeed very soon. You're going to cut down all of your wasteful activities. You're going to empower your teams to do the right thing. So I want to start the session with that because I totally believe that starting with a statement stance like that is the right way to go. Otherwise, learning Jira is not going to just solve your problems, right? Learning Jira is just giving you one mechanic. That mechanic itself will not help you, right? So this is what I'm going to discuss. The first thing, I'm going to talk about the workflow basics. Second, I'm going to go into Jira and teach you how to create a custom issue type. And I'm going to teach you how to create a workflow and assign the workflow into that custom issue type, right? So it's pretty much what we are trying to achieve. Uh, so this is basically the workshop that I'm going to do, the masterclass that is scheduled. So I have a great offer. I'm going to elaborate that at the end of the session, but just to brief you on that, if you register, if you have already registered, you get the same offer, right? No worries. But if you haven't registered, if you want to register, if you register and make your payments within the next 48 hours time, you are going to get 65% massive discount for the masterclass, as well as you're going to get a free entry to the Jira Automation Masterclass. But remember, this is only available for the next 48 hours, right? Just wanted to educate you on that before we jump into the contents. So we spoke about the problems. We are not going to talk about that again. I'm going to straight away head into the topic, Jira Workflows. First, let's have a look at the definition of the workflows. The definition, if you look at the definition of the workflows, a workflow is a set of statuses and transitions that an issue moves through during its life cycle and typically represent a process within your organization. Now, that's the purpose. That's the reason why I wanted to talk about the processes before I utter the word workflows, before I talk about the Jira workflows. What becomes a workflow is a process of your organization. That is where I said your processes got to be lean, your processes got to be optimized before you go and implement them. Of course, you can start somewhere, but your intention should be continuously optimizing your workflows so that you are going to have the best possible set of activities that you have to go through in order to get something done. Example, if you want to manage the general task within your team, at the moment, you might have a suboptimal way of working, picking up the tasks, prioritizing them, and executing them. If you want to optimize that process, what you need to do first is do that process re-engineering aspect, work on the process re-engineering, process optimization, optimize your processes to ensure that you have the most ideal, most optimistic, most optimized, not optimistic, most optimized workflow or the process. Then go and implement that in the Jira workflow, right? Workflows can be associated with particular projects and optionally specific issue types by using a workflow scheme. Here is the beauty of Jira workflows. You can have multiple projects in your organization. Project is kind of the top level hierarchy in Jira. If you use premium version of Jira, you are going to have one level above, that is the initiative level, right? However, there can be multiple projects grouped under initiative, so it can be just one-to-one mapping. So it depends on your structure that you put in place. However, the project is supposed to be the top hierarchy in the issue structure. What a project is, it's a set of a collection of issues. Everything, anything and everything that you keep tracking in Jira is called an issue. In generic terms, issue is potentially a problem that is happening right now. But in Jira, according to the terminologies used in Jira, issue is anything that you have been logging into Jira. It could be a service ticket, it could be a general task, it could be a candidate that you are logging in, if you could be onboarding task, if you could be a technical task, it could be a change request, anything and everything that you keep tracking in Jira is an issue, right? So what this says is you can use workflows with specific projects and also with specific issue types. So imagine a situation, you have a project, right? Let's say you are going to set up a project for your technical team, or you are going to set up a project for your admin team or the finance team. So any given team will have different types of tasks. Example, let's consider a development team. So the development team is going to work on different tasks, issue types, like they are going to work on the stories, they are going to work on epics, they are going to work on capabilities, they are going to work on production tickets, they are going to work on production improvements, they're going to work on the effects. There will be many things, right? So what we can do is we can create specific workflows for these issue types and assign them to the specific issue type so that they follow different structure, different workflow when you want to work on them. So otherwise, just implementing one workflow within the organization is not going to help you because it's going to be too generic, right? So this is what it says. Next thing, if you look at how you can create a workflow, there are four options given to you. First one, you can use an inbuilt workflow from Jira. So Jira, when you set up Jira, whether it's server version or the cloud version, will have default workflows given to you by default. You'll have sufficient set of processes you can straight away start using. So if you are a team who really don't know how to implement a Jira workflow, tweak it the way you want, it's totally fine. So you can use one of the inbuilt Jira workflows. So then you are not going to customize it, right? Example, if you are a development team, there are good enough development workflows available in Jira as you set up Jira instance. So you start using them. So I know that a lot of teams do that, right? Initial stages, I did the same. When I joined certain startups and scale ups, in certain cases, sometimes the big corporates, they had default workflows being set up. Makes sense, right? But there are three other options as well. The second option is editing one of these inbuilt workflows from Jira. Understood? So you can edit one of the existing inbuilt workflows to customize the workflow the way you want. So this is most ideal option if you want to have very specific optimized workflows. Say what is given to you doesn't fit into your requirement. Then you need to customize it the way you want. So what you can do is you can start with an inbuilt workflow, optimize it, customize it, and use that the way you want. That is the second option. The third option is create your own workflow from the scratch. So I generally go for that. It's easy because you really don't have to worry about what is already been implemented, right? So if you are very clear about what we are trying to do, how the workflow activities are being organized, what are the transitions that you want, what are the different statuses that you have to track, straight away you go and implement your workflow from the scratch, right? But that is just one of the four options. The fourth option is the easiest if you have a little bit of money, right? So this is buying from Atlassian marketplace. So Atlassian has a marketplace where they have lot of third party plugins as well as the workflows in this context. So you can search for those workflows and start purchasing them. Works for some teams, particularly if you have a very urgent requirement, very unique requirement where you really don't have process consultants and agile coaches who are really helping you on that, right? So you buy one of the optimized workflows proven to work and start adapting that. So hope this makes sense, right? uh, so the next thing is just few more tips quickly, right? So when you are implementing Jira workflows, keep these things in mind. First thing is ensure that you start with a lean mindset. You know how to navigate through the challenges that you have as well as optimize your processes, right? Make sure your processes are efficient, lean, so that you don't have unnecessary steps involved. Second thing is, remember agile principles. Now one problem that I observe is that most of the agile teams overlook the agile principles and values when they implement Jira. They think it's just a tool where they don't really have to consider agile principles and values. Example, uh, most of you would agree with me, your Kanban board does not talk about any Kanban principles, right? Most of your team members might not be aware of these principles at all, simply because you think it's a way of just tracking your work, just like creating a work breakdown structure in the traditional context and using it, right? No one pays very serious attention as to what is the level of details we need to achieve, implement on a Kanban board, right? So if you know Kanban, you know that there are three basic principles, right? One example is visualizing the thing. So you need to optimize your visualization, right? Kanban is an information radiator for agile teams, nothing else, right? It's not the police tracker, right? It's not the tracker where you're going to pinpoint to someone and then say you are a culprit. No, this is a way of visualizing the work progress that is relevant to you, so everyone including your stakeholders need to know what's going on, right? So things like that, there are multiple things that you have to adapt there. The next thing is, never overcomplicate your processes. This is another mistake that I see. We try to overcomplicate the processes, assuming that it's going to help. No, it will not, right? Your workflow has to be the most simplistic, bare minimal process being implemented. How do you get there? It needs to be a continuous process. It needs to be continuously improved. So you have to pay week by week attention, optimizing your process, the way you work, ensure you have the optimum process. So apply this concept, right? So if you haven't come across these things, just jot them down, do a bit of homework, go back and do research about these terms, because these are extremely useful before you head into Jira. Value stream mapping. So you probably need to work on this if you want to have a very holistic approach to optimize your processes across the organization, right? Next thing is, most of the majority of the teams don't use all the capabilities available in Jira, right? I guarantee you, if you are already using Jira, if you are already using a workflow or set of workflows, most of you wouldn't have used conditions and validations. Most of you wouldn't have used triggers. Most of you wouldn't have used validations, right? And automation. So these are some of the capabilities given to you. You got to master the tool first, right? Then tweak it the way you want it. So this is where agile coaches and scrum masters, as well as product leadership, the folks who are working on the product leadership, have to be smart, knowing ins and outs of Jira workflows and tweaking it the most optimum way. So that's that, right? So this is where we are going to start the discussion, implementing a workflow. So we have 50 minutes, which is quite good enough. So this is the workflow that I'm going to implement together with you. uh, I will not be able to give you any time to practice, since it's just a introductory session where the time is not going to be enough if you do so. But I'm going to take you through a very comprehensive demo, elaborating everything that you need to know, pretty much everything that need to know in order to create a workflow and set it up. There will be much more advanced things that I will expose in the masterclass. You if you join that, I will assure that you will develop the competency that you require in order to become a pro in Jira Workflows, right? So let's get started. The workflow that I'm going to implement is pretty straightforward. Okay. It has few workflow statuses, right? So these are called statuses. These are different states of your workflow, right? Example, as you create a general task, the status assigned to your workflow activity is task backlog. In other words, as soon as you create a task, it goes to the backlog. From the backlog, you prioritize a particular task. Once you prioritize it, you start grooming, you start refining the details of that particular task. When you finish refining the task, then you start working on that task, right? Why this intermediate step? It is to optimize your workflow, just to ensure that you have an additional check to see whether your story or general task is groomed enough, refined enough. In case it does not have sufficient information, you're going to send it back to the prioritized state and tell the fellow or the team, hey, you got to refine the details. Because I see, some in some cases, you're going to start working on certain task with a title. Have you come across that? How many of you have come across a situation where your product owner creates a task or a story with just the title and you are okay to proceed, right? That's not going to help. Yeah. So you need to implement discipline, not to onboard the task and commit for such task with just one title, with zero information in the description. So if I see something like that, I'm going to send it back to prioritize and ask the colleague to refine it. Once it's refined, let's move on, then start working. So then you transition it to in progress. From in progress, you can go back to the prioritized state. You can reopen it, right? You can say, hey, let's go back. Let's deprioritize this. I want certain additional details to be defined, right? If you are happy with the work that you have done, you can send it for review. It's something like manager review, lead review. So I'm done with the work assigned to me. I'm sending it to peer review, right? Or lead review or manager review. So the manager reviews it, make it done, transfer it to done. Okay. The next step is next state, additional state is closing. That is, so it's not same as done. Closing means closing a story due to various other reasons. Let's say there is a duplicate. You figure that in the backlog, the same task is being duplicated. So then what you're going to say is close it, stating that you're going, this is a duplicate, right? Again, you're working on something right here. You're working on something and you figure that this particular work cannot be continued. Let's say it's not possible to complete this task. It's redundant now. It's not valid anymore. So you're going to close it. Get it? So this is an additional status allowing the team or the individuals of the team to close the stories that are not going to continue. So it depends on what you want, right? I have decided to offer that. So that's the thing, right? So then what we are going to do is these few things in Jira. I'm going to walk you through creating a general task workflow, a workflow for general task. Why I take a general context here, general case study here, is to uh, simplify the explanation, right? I don't want to talk about a very comprehensive workflow that I, of course, will discuss in the masterclass. And I also give you lot of sample, lot of templates, workflow templates, about 6 to 8 templates so that you can adopt across the organization at multiple levels, starting from the leadership level to the operational level. But in this case, I want to make it the most simplistic explanation. So I use a very generic task workflow. Then I create a workflow scheme. I'll tell you what it is. I create a issue type, and then I show you how to apply that workflow and start using. Okay. So I'll also, if time permits, I will also just quickly introduce you to the advanced configurations, like setting up validations, conditions, and triggers, etc. All right. So let me just share you one more thing just before I go here. That is, maybe I'll straight away head into this, right? I'll get back there very soon. So I'm gonna start my personal Jira instance. Okay. So I'm gonna use one of the projects that I have created earlier. That is this one. Okay. All right. So I'll create a new project just to be clear, just to ensure we don't get any conflicts here. So I'm gonna say Jira Workflows Masterclass, right? So when you keep typing the name, when you finish typing the name, the key for the project is generated. If you wish to change it, you can change it. I'm fine with it. I'm gonna use one of these templates, right? I'm not gonna go into details of those selections. I just want to show you how to get started. So I created the project, right? Now, one thing, if you want to set up a workflow, you want to create a workflow in your Jira instance, you have to be a site admin. Have you checked that is going here? Hopefully this will work. I switched from a different account. Okay. No, at the moment it doesn't take this thing, right? So I have the account. So what you have to do is to go there uh, and look at, let me see. No, I'll switch. So I'll get back. I'll get into that later because it's not so relevant. So only thing that you need to remember is you have to have site level administration. You have to go to user management. If you, I mean, if you won't be able to do that if you don't have a site admin privileges. But if you are a site admin, you can just validate it. If you want to get into workflow setup, creating workflows, configuring them, you need to seek approval. You need to seek permissions from your leadership team for you to become a site admin, right? So that's first thing first. The second thing is you create a project. You once you create the project, you will be having a default board here, right? Just one board. That's your default board. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom issue type. I'll show you how I do that. I'm going to click on this setting icon. As I click on the setting icon, I get this particular menu displayed underneath. So I select issues, right? I open it in a new window. And I'm going to go into here, issue types. So on the left menu, you have issue type segment. So under that, I'm going to create one issue type. All right. So here it is. These are the existing issue types. So if I want to create an issue type, all what I have to do is to click on add issue type, add the issue type, right? Just adding the name. So I'm going to say general tasks, right? So your issue type can be a main issue type or a subtask issue type. Subtask will appear under the main issue types. Example, if you create a task, you can create subtasks. And if you want a subtask, custom type, your custom type issue type to be a subtask, you can simply pick this but at this point, I want it to be a general task. Okay, click create. So I created that. You can search for that. General, search for it. You will see that. Yeah. Now I'll just simply edit the verb, so the issue type. I want to put a custom image. So I'm going to pick one of these things for the moment, right? So I'm going to pick this. Yeah. Uh, I'll say this is the icon that I'm going to use. Update it. Now issue type is available. So I'm going back to the project here. Now what I do is, again, I go here actually, right? So what I want to do now is to create a workflow. Okay. The workflow that I'm going to create is task workflow. How do I get into that? Same steps that I followed, I'm repeating the same. You click on the settings icon here, click on issues, then you will be prompted with this screen where you have a left menu with multiple configuration options that you can do as a site admin. Remember, this is site administration. It's not just project administration. Project administration is simply opening the project, going to the project settings, managing those administrative privileges. So in order to create a workflow, you need site level administration, right? So you see the segment workflows. Under this segment, you see two menu items. What are those? Workflows and workflow schemes. This is to create a workflow. This is to create a workflow scheme. I'll tell you what it is. So just click on it. You see that there are already existing workflows, right? Example, I have created previously in my previous workshops, I created different workflow schemes. What a workflow scheme is it's a collection of workflows grouped under one specific theme. Example, if I want to create a technical workflow scheme for my development team, I can create a scheme and name it something like development workflow scheme. This is unique, that is going to have all the workflows that will be used by the development team. Why this is important? If you have multiple projects in your Jira setup, you don't want to mix up these workflows, right? Of course, there will be certain common workflows being shared among multiple teams, multiple workflow schemes. But most of these workflows will be very unique to departments, very unique to different processes, right? So bundle them and call it a workflow scheme. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to now, again, pretty simple how you create a workflow scheme, right? So I'm going to create a workflow scheme called development workflow scheme. Yeah, give a description. This is used by the devs. Yeah, it can be anything that you wish to mention, elaborating. So as you create, what happens? It's pretty simple so far, right? As you create the workflow, you are given a default workflow. Do you see? It says the default Jira workflow. How do I know what it is? Just click on the text or the diagram. If you want to see the diagram of this particular workflow, so let me maximize that. Okay. You can see that it's a very simplistic workflow where it says open, in progress, reopen, resolved, and close. Simple, right? But this might not work. This is not what I want to do. So I'm gonna just leave that as it is and going to implement my own workflow. So I have a workflow scheme named dev workflow scheme. I'm gonna name it more specifically. I will say, so this is just one naming mechanism that I just use here. You can come up with your own way of naming it, right? I'm gonna say V1, save it, go to workflows. Now I'm going to create a workflow from the scratch. I don't want any templated workflows to use. I'm going to start from the beginning, from the scratch. So this is how you add a workflow. Click on add workflow, type the name. The name for the workflow, let me say dev. So I'm going to say R&D, sorry, R&D general tasks workflow V1. All right. Give a description. I am going to skip that for the moment. So the workflow is created. As you create the workflow, you are given a bare minimal workflow to start with. Okay. Your workflow is just that you have a starting point, you have one status, one transition. Now, if you try to delete this, you can't, because this workflow will not allow you to delete the only status that you have in your workflow, right? So ideally we need to delete it, but there is a way. So what you have to do is understand few basics about the workflows, right? Now, workflow is a collection of statuses and transitions. Remember that. All what it has is a set of statuses like this and set of transitions like this. What a status is, it is a particular state of your activity. So when you are working on a task, where do you start? As you create a task, what is the status that you want to mention? That is a status. From that state, what is the next status? That is going to be another status. Example, in our example, we say task backlog is the initial status. As you create a task, the status of that particular task is made task backlog. From task backlog, you can move that to prioritized state. From prioritized state, you can move that to in a groom state or refined state. What allows you to move one particular task from one state to another is a transition. Example, as you create, you use the transition called create. So from the starting, you transition the task you create into open state. Yeah. So this is, what is the transition name? Create. What is the status name? Open. So I'm going to tweak this. I'm going to make it my own workflow as per what I just told you, right? So I'm gonna just keep the close status and the transition just to save the timing. Later, if time permits, we come back and change that, right? So where do you start? Click outside, click on add transitions. Sorry, not add transitions. My bad. Add status. So as you type, you see the default already existing statuses appearing here. So I'm going to say task back task backlog, right? Task backlog is already available, so I don't have to create a new, I can't create a new status with the same name. So I have to just pick this. While you're picking, notice this box, checkbox. It says allow all status. Hello?
ఒకటిదాల అయితే
Hello?
వాళ్ళు నాన్న కాదు
Hold on. Let me
నేను
mute
తాగలేను
some
మమ్మీ పెట్టలేను
of the colleagues.
మీరు ఏదైనా ఒకటి చిన్నది ఇంత కూర్చొని కాసేపు మాట్లాడతా దగ్గినాడు హోటల్కి.
So I have to mute someone. Okay. All right. So here, So I'm creating that status. Did I create? No, not yet. Add status, task backlog, add, right? So there was one checkbox saying allow all statuses to transition to this one. So you can still check that after creating it if you want, right? What it means is if you want to allow users to transition the task from any other statuses to this state, you have to enable this, simply check in this. Yeah. So this means from any other status, you can transition the status to this. So I will not check that for the moment, right? Now what I do is I have to now move this transition from here to this one, right? Got it? Now I'm going to delete this. Now it's possible to delete because it's isolated. So I have my first workflow status created, right? What is the next one? So I'm going to say prioritized. Prioritize, add. It's already there. Oops, what is that? So I'm going to right, something wrong here. Wait. So my mouse doesn't work. So let me use the. Oh, right. So sorry about it. So there's a slight issue where I can't just drag this. Okay. Right. It works now. So now this is the transition, right? In creating a transition, all what you have to do is, so you can actually do this also, right? Add transition. So if you don't drag and drop, you can still create the transitions. So you simply select the starting status, task backlog, the next one. Next one is prioritize. So I'm going to say prioritize your task, right? And then I'm going to create another status. The next status is groomed, right? So I'll say groomed, and it is from prioritize. So sorry, this is a transition, my bad. So what you have to do is you have to create a status, not a transition. Groomed, new status, add. So when you're creating a status, notice the category. So your the status you create has to be one of these three things. It's either to do, in progress, or done. So pick to do if it's something that indicates that work is not yet started. Use in progress category if the work is already started. If you consider, okay, this transition allows you to start the work, that this is already starting the work, then it has to be in progress. If it's done, like something like done, close, cancel, all these are done statuses because that is an end, right? So here I will use to do for the moment and then place it here, drag and drop. So I'll use this. There's, I think my mouse doesn't work properly. So I'm going to say from groomed, prioritize to groom, right? So I'm going to say refine the details. Yeah. So I'm quickly creating other statuses. The next one is in progress. So it is there. So I'm not going to create a new one. So I'm going to say work in progress, create it. You see that it's an in progress state. In progress statuses are indicated in blue color, right? So let's add the transition. So I'm going to say groomed from group to in progress, it's going to say start working. That's a verb because it's a transition. The next one is review. I'll say in review. I'll use one of the existing statuses, create it, drag, and create the transition. Add status. I'm going to say work in progress. Oh, sorry. So I'm doing I clicked on the status. Work in progress to in review. I'll say review the task. Then I click on this again, create done. So this is my last transition as I just mentioned. So I want it to be a done category, right? By default, it will be figured when you, because Jira is somewhat capable of figuring out these default ones because there is already uh, available status called done, right? So then I did not have to pick up the category. So the transition is complete the task. Done, right? Now, only thing that I want to do is, so I need to enable one other thing here. In case you want to resume the work, right? Basically enabling backward transition, starting from review, going into work in progress. And I call it resume work. That is, if the reviewer feels like this is not so done, so it will send it back to work in progress. Yeah. So this is good enough process that we can implement, right? Workflow that you can implement. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to do is, right, save this. It's already saved. The name of the workflow is this one, right? I'll go to workflow scheme. I'll add this. So let me do one more thing here, right? So let me go to the project settings. I'm going to go into the project settings and issue types. So I'm going to add that issue type into the project because what I want to do is to bring that additional issue type, custom issue type into this project. So currently these are the issue types available. I want that additional issue type to be created. So I'm going to take that from here. You will see that general task is the issue type to create. I'm going to drag that and drop it here, right? It's done. So I'm going to put that at the top, save. So this issue type is added to the project. Now I'll go to the workflow scheme here, pick up the workflow that I created. I said, is it task or no? Dev, was it dev? I forgot the scheme name, R&D. So let me, so it's actually inactive workflow schemes. So let me run through it. This one, right? This is the one. So I'm going to go into the workflow, edit. So currently there's just one workflow. I'm going to add the workflow that I created here. The workflow that I created is R&D. Is it R&D? Okay. Yeah, R&D general task workflow V1. So I'm going to pick that, click next. Now the next step is mapping the issue types into this particular workflow. So of course you can pick more than one issue type, but for the moment I have very specific issue type that I want to attach to this workflow, right? I don't want any other issue type to be attached to this workflow. So I select that issue type I created, general task, click finish. Yeah, it's done. The workflow is added to the workflow scheme. Now I go to the project here. Let me refresh it. Now what I have to do is to add that workflow into the project. So in order to do that, I go into workflows. So this is project settings. Opening the project, you go to the project settings, you get this menu. Then you have workflows menu option here. Now see, notice this. What is the workflow scheme that is applied to this project? That's a default workflow. Software simplified workflow scheme. Now I'm not happy with that. I don't want this workflow scheme to be used here, right? So I want to switch the workflow scheme to the one that I created. So what I'm going to do is pick up that workflow scheme here, right? So the one that I created was dev workflow scheme to 2021 V1. I associate that with this project. Since no issues created in this project, I don't have to worry a lot. But if you are changing the workflow scheme for an existing project, you need to ensure that your issues are taken care of. So if there are, let's say, hundreds of issues created under different issue types, then you need to ensure that you migrate those issues appropriately. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess, right? So that's one reason I created this thing, because our time is not enough for me to run through all these areas, right? So workflow is added, you see here. Yeah. And this is for general task. Now what I'm going to do is it's simply what we are supposed to do here, right? One more thing that I want to show you here before I open the Q&A is showing you how to create a board and basically get that workflow visualized on a board, right? Now, this is what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to create a board here. Create board. I'm going to use a Kanban. I'm going to use the existing project, right? So I'm going to say board from an existing project. That means I'm creating this board out of the project that one of the project is available. I'm going to use the same project that I created, right? So the board name is general tasks. I'll say tracker. And I'll select the project I just created. What was that? This one. Yeah. And where then I select where I want this to be located. I want the board to be created inside this project, same project, right? Create board. All right. So the board is created. Now what I have to do is to figure out how the board is displayed, right? So I'm going to go into the board settings, general, look at the filter that is used. Yeah. So there is a filter associated with this board that basically says display all the types of issues in this particular board. I don't want that to happen. I want to basically, okay, you can't switch to basic. So I'm going to say, I just want general task to be displayed, nothing else, right? So I'm going to save this, go back here. Yeah. So I'm going to go back here, refresh this, go to columns. So when you go to columns, you see the statuses here. So I'm going to rearrange the board. So let me do these things appropriately. I'm going to create a task backlog. So I'm going to put the task backlog status into the backlog. I'm going to keep, I'm going to change this to prioritized, right? Prioritize. So I'm gonna go here and change it to refined. I'm gonna add an additional status called in progress. I'm gonna create one more status called in review. Now what I do is I just put the right statuses into the right column, right? Work in progress, drone. Your body is done. And we are using the workflow that we created. So as you create a particular task as a general task, right? You will see that the workflow is already working. So as I just created the task, what is the status assigned to that? Task backlog. Now, if I want to transition this from to the next state, all what I see is just the next possible transition, right? So when I prioritize, I can go to the Kanban board and see whether that works correctly. Yeah, it's here. Now you can drag and drop these things, right? Refine and move on. So this is basically the basics of workflow creation that I wanted to kind of take you through. Uh, Maybe some of you are already familiar with what we discussed, but in addition to these things, there are a lot more things that we can do. So I'll just show you a quick thing, right? Just using the next 2 minutes. One thing possible here, right? So if you go to the workflows again, issues, workflows. So I'm going to search for the workflow that I created, R&D General Workflow V1. I'm going to go and edit that workflow. Yeah. So when you're editing a workflow, so one thing that you need to do is basically make a copy before you apply, but certain changes can be done. So I'm going to try out that and show you what happens when you try to edit a workflow that is already assigned to this project. Certain changes can be done, but certain changes are restricted. You are not allowed to do certain changes. The change that I want to do is this: as I create the backlog, right? As I create a particular task, I want to do a validation, right? So this is where the advanced workflow configurations will come in. So I select this transition, then I see that there are three possible actions here, options here: properties, validators, post functions. So I can create a validation here. There is already one validation, right? Only users with create issue permission can execute this transition. I'm going to remove that, right? I think that is valid one. In addition to this, I want to create an additional validation, right? How do I do that? I'll say add validator, select one of these. These are different validators that you can use. I'm going to say permission validator. This is to see how you can validate it. So the validation that I want to put in is a very simple one. I just want to say, right, if the user, if the current user has administrative privileges, then only you should be able to create a task. So I'll put that validation. After editing the workflow configurations, you have to publish the draft. So this is where it will tell you whether this is possible or this is not possible, having it applied to a project. So let's try, right? So I'm going to say create a backup, publish. So that is actually possible, right? So certain things, like if you want to delete a transition, if you want to delete an existing workflow status, those are not possible, simply because it's already applied and certain issues might be there attached to, assigned to that particular status that you are trying to delete. So therefore it does not allow you to do that. Now what it means is, right, when you create the task here, if I'm not a project admin, I will not be able to create a task. But since I'm an admin, I'm able to create the task, right? So there are a lot more configurations, advanced configurations like that. Another thing is, right? So say uh, when you review, when you move this to in review from work in progress, you can automate the transition, right? Also, you can put certain other uh, actions like post action items, some things like I can say once you transition this, create a subtask and assign it to the manager of the team. So that way you really don't have to manually update that. So there are a lot more possibilities with Jira Workflow. So what I told you, what I elaborated today are some of the basics of workflow creation and workflow configuration. I'm sure this would have been a value, and I would like to dedicate the next 7 minutes for any questions that you have. And I'm okay to extend it by a few minutes in case you have further questions. So the floor is yours. Let me know if you have any questions that you want to clarify. Anyone with any questions? If you don't have any questions, that is fine as well. Okay. Uh, so while you are waiting for the questions, while I'm waiting for the questions, so again, in case you want to join the Jira Masterclass, which is 3 hour plus, if you join the Jira Masterclass upcoming one, you are going to get a free entry for the Jira automation. Another 3 hours, so it's basically 3 hours for this particular pricing offer. So grab it if you want to grab it. All what you have to do is register uh, for the program. I will drop that link, and I will also do a follow-up email just communicating the same information to you, right? So those who are here, let me share that link with you. I think most of you are aware of that since you are coming from the LinkedIn event, right? But let me share that with you. No questions. Interesting. So I'm going to put that link into Zoom as well, so that anyone who has not come across this. Oh, sorry, my bad. I copied the wrong one. Here it is. So the offer is basically if you register in the next 48 hours, basically 2 days, you get this offer. Unfortunately, we will not be able to offer this offer after the next 48 hours, right? And again, if you register for this, you get a free entry for the next masterclass that is due in 2 weeks. That is basically in the first week of April on Jira automation. So that's where I'm going to talk about everything that you need to know in terms of Jira automation, right? Automating your workflows, automating your other areas like creating tasks, creating reports, sending Slack messages automatically, generating reports. All that is included in that training. All right. So if you do not have any questions, I would like to say a big thank to you. Although everyone did not stay until the last minute of the session, appreciate those who are still here, watching and listening to me. Uh, yeah, so I'll get in touch with you. Keep in touch. I'm more than happy to work with you, help you to optimize your expertise on Jira as well as Agile related areas. Yeah. So that's one question. Workflows in next gen project versus classic project. That's a good question. That this is a tricky thing at the moment. If you are using work next gen projects, workflow customization is pretty limited. Uh, so you are not able to do everything that you do in classic projects. The next gen project at the moment they're going to change it. So Jira just announced that they're going to change the setup and the capabilities in next gen project soon. But at the moment, uh, it's pretty limited. So next gen projects for now is just for business heavy teams who are not technically savvy, right? So if pretty much one project, one board kind of approach, right? So you are not able to set up totally customizable workflows and assign them to multiple boards. So if you want to do that, you need to pick classic version, uh, and that's the only way around at this point, right? So you can do a bit of customization uh, to the workflow that is available in next gen project, but it's pretty strict and limited, right? So if you have plans to customize your workflows, my strong recommendation is moving to classic version of Jira. Yeah. So again, another question saying thanks for the review overview and answering my question. Okay, my pleasure, my dear. So thank you for your question as well. Will the next sessions be recorded? Yes, of course. Yes, I will record them whenever it's a free session, right? So the paid master classes will never be recorded. I mean, they are recorded, but will not be sharing the contents. So probably you need to enroll if you want to learn the best tips and tricks, going into deeper levels of knowledge and competency, right? Okay, so that's it for the day. Thank you very much again. Appreciate your trust placed joining this session, learning throughout the session. Wish you good luck. Uh, Hope to talk to you soon and see you soon. Until then, take care. Stay safe.